I've touched there on the second reason as well. I actually think that seeing Jesus would possibly have not been a help to faith, but a hindrance. What an amazing thing for a Christian to say. What do I mean by that? I don't know if you're a fan of Doctor Who. I'm not really, but I've seen it and I know what it is, obviously. He has a TARDIS box, doesn't he? And it's a time machine. And just imagine if we had a TARDIS box here and I said to you, we're going to go back in history. We're going to go and get into this TARDIS machine and we're going to go right back in history to see the most important person who ever walked the face of the planet. He is the king over all other kings, and we're going to go back in time to see him. Jump in, come on. So we jump in the TARDIS box, we close the door, and there's that horrible music and that kind of thing that looks like a washing machine that used to scare me when I was a child. Woo! I used to hide behind the sofa when Doctor Who came on. I'm not scared now, obviously I've grown up, but so we get the music and the washing machine goes on and we go back in time and the time machine lands with a bump in a garden. And the door opens and we step outside and it's evening, it's dark. And as our eyes get accustomed to the light, we're very excited to see the most important person who's ever walked the face of the planet, this great king. And from one side of the garden we see a group of soldiers with lanterns. And they're walking quite purposefully across this garden. And our eyes range across, and there's another group, a smaller group of men. And as the soldiers approach this second group, one of these men, who seems to be the leader in this group, steps forward. And the soldiers grab hold of him, and they frog march him away. This second group, they flee. This man is taken away. And all through the night, he's passed between different politicians. They ask him loads of questions, and by the morning, they strip him and tie his hands to a pillar, and they flog him until his back is ploughed and bleeding. Then, amazingly, the soldiers give him the crossbeam of a cross to carry. And the soldiers lead him out of the city, through the wall, and up onto a small hill outside Jerusalem, and there they nail him to this crossbeam and lift it up, drop it into a socket, and hang him up to die. Now you tell me, seeing that with your own eyes, would that be a help to your faith or a hindrance? Would you say, wow, this man must be the king? I think that would be a stumbling block to your faith, don't you? I think sometimes we don't appreciate what we say when we say, if only I could have seen. Would seeing that have led you to trust him? I think you would have gone home very confused. And you can jump back in the TARDIS box now and come back to Rotherham. We're back here now in 2010. Seeing all of this would not help you to believe, but be a hindrance. The Bible says in the book of Isaiah, the prophet in the Old Testament, that there was nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. So my point to you is, if you were going to believe in this man, you would need to see something else, wouldn't you? Beyond what you see with your physical eyes, you would need to see something with the eyes of your heart and with the eyes of your soul, if you are really going to trust in this man. So I put it to you that seeing is not believing. We need to see something beyond what we can see with our physical eyes and see something else that is really there, but that is only perceived with the eyes of our hearts. That's why this verse hangs true. They hadn't seen him, and yet they loved him, because the eyes of their heart were opened to see something beyond just the physical. Maybe you know this Bible secret, that actually the truth is that no one can see what is really there unless the living God opens the eyes of their heart to see beyond the physical, to perceive who Jesus really is and what he came into this world to achieve. This kind of Bible faith does not come naturally. But the great encouragement of the Bible is that God can and has and is and does reveal himself to human beings, opens the eyes of our hearts so that we can see what is really there. We could go to Matthew chapter 16. Do you remember the account when Jesus got his disciples together and he said, "Hey guys, who do people say that I am?" And the disciples looked at each other and they said, "Well, some people say that you're Elijah, come back from the dead. Some people say that you're John the Baptist, reincarnated in some way." And then Jesus goes for the jugular and he says to his disciples, "What about you? Who do you say that I am?" And Peter, ever the spokesman for the rest of the group, he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." This man's a carpenter from Nazareth. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus says something very profound to him. And he says to him, "Blessed are you, Simon, Peter, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Peter could see, but he only could see because God had opened his eyes to see what was really there. And that's the experience of every true Christian, as well as these Christians in this chapter that we're looking at. I'm thinking also of Thomas. You remember Thomas, poor old doubting Thomas. Everyone's heard of Thomas, haven't they? Jesus appears to all the disciples and we don't know where Thomas was. Maybe he was at home moping. I don't know. Maybe he was shopping. All the disciples are there. Thomas misses out. Jesus appears to them. And when they tell Thomas, "We've seen the Lord," Thomas says, "No way. You're all mad. I don't believe you." It's not just one of them. All of them have seen Jesus. "Thomas, you've got to believe us. Why would we lie to you? I won't believe it. I'm not believing it." And he says very famously, "Unless I can put my finger in where the nails went in his hands and put my hand in where the spear went in his side, I will not believe it unless I see it." Seeing is believing. What a week that must have been for Thomas. They must have drove him mad. All through that week, "Thomas, you've got to believe." "I don't believe." They must have had so many discussions and fallouts and arguments. And the following week, Jesus appears to them and Thomas is there. And Jesus very gently says to him, "Thomas, here I am. You can put your fingers in the wounds." Thomas doesn't need to. But has it ever struck you what he said? What Thomas sees with his eyes is a man alive in front of him. But he kneels down in front of Jesus and what he actually says is, "My Lord and my God." His eyes are open not just to see a man before him alive, but to see authority and power and divine power there in front of him. Jesus, the Lord, the Son of God, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, which is relevant to this verse, "Blessed are those who don't see, who yet believe." So, I don't think seeing is believing. It doesn't work that way from a Bible point of view. And then we can get back to our verse here. Here's a little diagram, I suppose. It's very simple, that speaks about faith and love and joy.